After the disastrous launch of WWE 2K20, a failure in trying something different with WWE Battlegrounds, and longtime developer Yuke's opting out of making any more WWE games, putting former assistant developer Visual Concepts in the figurative driver's seat, WWE 2K22 was a make-or-break situation for the series. Revamping the gameplay by adding more of an arcade presentation where striking combos were the route to successful grappling, adding new modes like My GM, and giving fans so many tools to create mostly whatever was in their imagination, WWE 2K22 righted the ship before it completely sank. Like nearly every year, I put my money down close to the release of 2K23 after enjoying the previous entry so much, in this case the digital-only Icon Edition, making it the most I've paid for a wrestling game ever. Pre-downloading it so when I got up bright and early on Tuesday I could see whether or not 2K23 was all that I wanted, a better version of its most recent predecessor, or a terrible waste of good money during one of gaming's most hectic release schedules. As per the norm, WWE 2K23 provides a hefty trophy and achievement list, demanding the player take part in all the modes, including the returning online-based, mostly offline, card-focused offering My Faction. Showcase mode returns this year, presenting an abridged look at the biggest losses in the WWE career of John Cena, featuring a stereotypical objective-fueled gameplay design alongside introductory interviews before each match and a shocking trio of final bouts unlike anything seen in previous showcase presentations. The showcase mode can last about 3 hours if everything goes right for the player, as none of the objectives are optional in this iteration. My Rise returns as well, with players having the opportunity to control a male or female created wrestler that either can be crafted for the mode and exported whenever the player sees fit, or import one of their creations from the creation suite. Unlike last year, My Rise's gender-based narratives are strictly separated, with the male version being the Lock story, while the female story is the Legacy, the latter initially focusing on a previous My Rise NPC that didn't have the friendliest of attitudes. Each My Rise story is extensive, with dozens of optional matches, stories, and challenges to gain attribute points to improve the grappler's overall stats. While you can import a created wrestler into the mode, everything but their player-assigned stats carry over, giving the players the option of focusing on the main narrative or seeing everything the mode has to offer, a feat that will take anyone 20 to 30 hours per playthrough. Another replacement in name but not necessarily in full presentation was 2K22's My Faction, which also returns here, an expanded version of 2K Towers from the previous game. Players will use earned in-game currency or spend real money for other digital dollars to purchase card packs. These cards have color-coded rarity stats that play into the fact gamers will actually play these wrestlers represented via said cards. The grind-heavy My Faction mode demands that players log in weekly, if not daily depending on their want to gather cards, and attain the several achievements and trophies associated with the online dedicated, mostly single-player mode, with the only option of playing against a real person is through the newly added quick play option, instead of the alluded to option of taking the whole card roster of 4 and battling another human player stacked card deck in anything from 8-man elimination battle royals to war games. And then there's My GM's second go-around, a management simulator that is both expanded and dumbed down compared to a spiritual predecessor and inspiration not seen in a WWE game since SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 until last year. Removing the option of having 15 to 52-week seasons by focusing on a solid 25-show run, players are given the opportunity to take on up to 3 other general managers, though human GM opponents are only local with no online features associated with the mode. Various updates from the previous version include the addition of secondary titles, more match types, and the ability to start a 2nd, 3rd, or even 10th season on the same file. Adds much more replayability to the mode that wasn't available in last year's iteration. Universe mode keeps the addition of Superstar mode from last year, where the player focuses on a single wrestler without the ability to simulate or skip that character's matches. Additions to Universe Mode include adjusting rivalry levels to increase the chances of different cutscenes, or just manually deciding to, say, instigate an impromptu attack featuring a ladder, with the intent of planning a ladder match for the upcoming Premier Live event. There's also the ability to fight others online, with this iteration not forcing gamers to slog through dedicated online fights that are usually hampered by lag and input delay for trophies or achievements. Though it must be noted the few online matches played in my faction were shockingly smooth and felt nearly as good as playing offline. The journey to Platinum status is still ongoing for yours truly, after over 30 hours, mostly thanks to the extensive My Rise and My Faction requirements. Though this year's completion requirements are in no way as annoying or difficult as WWE 2K22's. Deciding to change the stamina and simulation-based gameplay seen in WWE games since 2K15 last year worked exceptionally well. The striking-based system like the old SmackDown games allows the grappling to be more of an exclamation point on the action. Players can string together combos featuring light and heavy strikes topped off by a quick grapple. That's not to mean players can grab an opponent and toss them around the ring without punching and kicking them first. Using the grapple button, no matter the situation, the player's character will grab their target and wait for the controller to hit a button input, heavy or light strike alongside a direction via the analog stick. Double tapping the grapple button will allow players to whip an opponent into the ropes or against the turnbuckles. A big change to what the series once was is the implementation of mostly infinite reversals. Players can pull off reversals at almost any time, including when someone attempts a signature maneuver or a finisher, without the fear of using up that last bar in the reversal meter. Almost unlimited reversal options are the only defensive measures in the player's repertoire, as wrestlers can now block when holding down the reversal button before a strike is thrown from the opponent, bob and weave as the player rotates the analog stick alongside blocking, and even dodge roll. Combo breakers exist by pressing the same strike button at the same time as an opponent is throwing the type of strike or performing a grapple attack, becoming a valuable tool in stopping combos mid-string. In place of the reversal and stamina meters is the special meter that fills up via the momentum bar below it. The special meter segmented bars can be used in various forms, including a single bar allowing a wrestler to escape the ring in one swift motion after being driven against the canvas. 2 special bars will be necessary to execute the returning payback maneuver, including spewing green mist or landing a low blow. Surprisingly, payback options haven't been expanded in numbers, but available slots, as each wrestler can have up to 2 paybacks slotted at a time. With 3 bars, a wrestler has the ability to pull off those signature maneuvers or a potential match-ending finisher. The combat system is a lot more player-friendly and reminiscent of the pre-8th generation entries, for better and for worse. The detrimental aspects are issues like hit detection still being a problem, struck characters shuddering before everything resets as if no one did anything beforehand. The somewhat odd control layout changes from the previous entry, including holding down the R2 trigger on the PlayStation controller and hitting one of the strike buttons to perform a signature maneuver or finisher, especially a running variation. And the main camera still being placed lower than it was pre-2K22, that it becomes difficult seeing reversal opportunities during multi-person bouts. For some, the return of the button mashing interface in regards to stopping pins or submissions may be disappointing. Thankfully for those who don't like the button mashing system, players can switch it back to the timed minigame of past WWE 2K games. Showcase stays true to the formula established years ago, with the player going through, in this case, 16 matches with the last 3 being fantasy-based, after the player has taken control of nearly a dozen wrestlers who've beaten John Cena during his Hall of Fame-worthy career in non-chronological order. Showcase's presentation, be it the pre-match interviews with Big Match John himself, or the in-game cutscenes, are mostly masterfully done, other than the generic music that plays throughout each match, something that wasn't the case in any iteration before this. The biggest issue with Showcase mode is here again, in that there aren't any checkpoints between the objectives needed for completion to activate the next cutscene. Without these checkpoints and the matches themselves potentially going unusually long because Cena refuses to accept that a finisher like Triple H's pedigree puts him down for the 3 count, can make the mode incredibly exhaustive, especially if something goes wrong and the player has to restart the entire match. Like Showcase, My Rise is a familiar take on what's been done in the past with my career, even with the 2 gender-oriented dedicated stories. Unlike the rags to riches stories seen in the past iterations of this mode, The Lock comes into WWE with a ton of hype thanks to his unseen exploits outside of the WWE universe. After winning the Intercontinental title on his first night, The Lock has to struggle with learning how to handle the figuratively shark-infested waters of WWE, while avoiding becoming a joke because of his very Vince McMahon-esque gimmick. The legacy focuses on a woman nicknamed Little Justine, or LJ, in honor of her aunt Justine, the same NPC Justine from last year's My Rise, trying to live up to the lofty success of her hero while creating her own awe-inspiring career. Though both the Lock and the Legacy stories have the option of making decisions that can create branching narratives, it is through LJ's actions that these repercussions appear sooner and more profoundly, a great way to encourage players to complete multiple playthroughs with the same or different characters. Getting fans to like a wrestler by competing in dozens of matches is removed in this version, with gamers just talking to NPCs or answering their DMs to unlock new stories and challenges. One of the biggest changes to My Rise is the addition of match objectives like those seen in Showcase mode, but lesser in number. Most match objectives are simple, such as pinning or submitting an opponent, but others are heavily reliant on the AI cooperating with the player by dishing out enough punishment to activate a cutscene. While these objectives are meant to add drama, at times it makes a match feel flat instead of exciting. As mentioned, the biggest change to Universe mode is the ability to mold and curate rivalries to the player's joy. There are still some functionality flaws in the mode, including the inability to add pre-made tag teams to stables without breaking them up. GM mode made its return with My GM in 2K22 and is back here in grander form. At the start, the player is given the option of choosing their brand, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, NXT 2.0, or WCW. An opposing show or shows, the player's representative general manager including a created GM, rival GMs, and how much the starting budget is, up to $3 million. As the season progresses after the initial draft, players can choose up to at least 9 wrestlers initially for their brand. So does the availability of different arenas to rent, utilizing bigger pyrotechnic setups, and seeing the new pool of talent, not drafted to any show that can be hired anywhere from a month to indefinitely. Managing egos and keeping promises to wrestlers can improve morale, or be hampered by losing streaks, or the head honcho Triple H deciding a star shouldn't wrestle on the same week the player's GM promised a particular wrestler a title opportunity. This talent management system is coupled by the implementation of power cards that can be purchased with the brand's budgeted money, or as a reward for completing certain weekly goals dictated by Triple H. These cards vary in their application, such as giving a wrestler a day at the spa that restores their stamina to avoid said superstar suffering a major injury, or hindering the opposing GM's show by doubling the cost for that week. But be careful, because an AI-controlled GM will gladly hit the player where it hurts with their own power card. The completion of premier live events will allow for the player to take part in the Superstar Shakeup, where the player is given the option of choosing one card that acts as a passive buff that can last anywhere between a few weeks or throughout the entire season, like all champions having boosted popularity. There are also season-long objectives that can be completed to earn Hall of Fame trophies. These trophies gained from meeting particular criteria, like earning $15,000 in a season, can be huge difference makers in the brand rankings if the opposing shows have nearly the same amount of fans and money in the bank, as the brand with more Hall of Fame trophies will always be ranked higher in these numerically close situations. There are quite a few improvements to the mode compared to last year's, including the addition of more match stipulation types, including multi-person battles. Though for some odd reason the developers decided having title matches in triple threat or fatal 4-way bouts wasn't a good idea. Something that hopefully will be changed in the near future with a patch, similar to how they improved My GM in 2K22 with patches. With the option removed of having up to a year of shows, instead focusing on 25 weeks, The addition of multiple seasons is a major benefit to the mode's overall lifespan. But with this reduced schedule removes the chance of players having multi-brand Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, or Money in the Bank matches, similar to what was seen in WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 15 years ago. There's also a lacking of having War Games in MyGM, a big miss considering the match stipulation was not only one of the most requested in WWE game history, but also one of the biggest focuses of marketing WWE 2K23. MyGM's class system returns, with each wrestler having a specific class associated with them, including Striker, Giant, and Specialist. Depending on the classes, certain wrestlers won't have good matches together, especially if they're in the same class. Instead, the mode wants players to match wrestlers like Giant and Cruiserweight to produce the best match possible. In the old GM mode, a wrestler's popularity influenced the match rating and made the mode that much more entertaining, as players could see the rise and fall in popularity of certain wrestlers while micromanaging matches and rivalries. Playing through the matches instead of simulating them will not change the match's star rating, just the outcome, making it no point to actually play through MyGM mode bouts unless the player wants a particular person to win. This rigid nature of making a player work in the system instead of crafting their show is the biggest detriment to what should have been a layup of a mode presentation, considering the template was already there with both the original GM mode from 2005 and Universe mode, with the latter's customization options. Though MyGM still has some significant flaws shortly after the game's launch, it is worlds better than the previous iteration. My faction, on the other hand, is mostly the same, with only a couple of new additions in terms of gameplay, including the online-oriented quick play and the miniature version of weekly towers called live events that have changing rewards in shorter or longer periods compared to the aforementioned towers. Beyond quick play and live events are the returning 3 core single-player options in the mode. Proving Grounds matches up 3 difficulty levels where the player earns medals used to unlock the next Proving Grounds chapter. Faction Wars, players take their entire 4-person team to fight another quartet in an 8-man tag in a figurative arcade ladder. And Weekly Towers, a static series of repeatable matches with rewards that change weekly. Sadly, none of this mode is online in terms of opposition or even comparing how well the player is doing to their friends. There are some more big issues with the mode. Not long after launch, some card options are still locked, to apparently avoid people from spending all of their real money to buy the most high-end cards, and dominate the online competition or cruise through the My Faction single-player modes. There are some big issues with this mode again, including certain characters, mostly legendary figures and old attires from modern wrestlers, and arenas are locked by this mode. This disappointment is coupled by the fact My Faction is a pure grind in terms of minimal completion, including the lifetime set of challenges where the players will have to do everything from completing 84 daily challenges. There are only 3 daily challenges available a day, and earn a cumulative 50,000 My Faction points, with most matches dishing out between 100 and 300 MFP. Essentially, My Faction is still an extensive mobile game that replaced a pretty enjoyable simple system that was 2K Towers. Though this iteration is a lot better than even 2K22 in terms of giving a player an offline experience when playing people online, when everything is functioning. Unlike a significant problem early in the launch where something like an Irish Whip disconnects any online game. Creation options are both plentiful and working to recapture the magic of the previous games. Character creation is still really good, including the option of adding imported pictures like faces and logos, the latter being associated with the other creation offerings including creating an arena and create a Money in the Bank briefcase. On the opposite end of the creation satisfaction spectrum is the return of the advanced option in Create an Entrance, where players can mix and match entrance motions, pyro, and lighting. Though the advanced option is back, quite a few implementations like certain fireworks and camera angles are still gone. Technically, 2K23 is a lot better than its predecessors, including less animation and graphical glitches, and game-breaking bugs. The biggest issue with crashing comes with creating wrestlers. After a couple of days, the creation suite became unpredictable, crashing no matter if a player is putting in 10 minutes or an hour crafting their newest wrestler, with the only option of saving is by exiting the creation suite and going back to the main menu. Those who pre-ordered the higher priced editions were allowed to play the game 3 days early. In that time though, the server stability was a problem, hindering the availability of my faction. Frame rates were surprisingly consistent even when 8 wrestlers were fighting at the same time. The graphics are mostly incredible, with the majority of the wrestlers looking like themselves, though quite a few of the legendary wrestlers have better versions created by the players ready to download than what the developers created. The new commentary lines are rather good, but not necessarily impressive. The sound mixing is definitely inconsistent between wrestlers, including some dialogue scenes in My Rise, where it sounds like they're in a tunnel. All WWE 2K23 had to do was continue the upward trend of what was started with 2K22. Overall, 2K23 accomplishes this goal by improving everything from the gameplay to the mode offerings, even if some of those changes are minuscule in nature. If you've been craving a fun wrestling game not strictly rooted in simulation, having a plethora of modes, though some are stronger than others, and looks fantastic, this is the WWE game you've been waiting for, without fear of constant functionality problems and the potential of certain improvements like those in MyGM being patched in as the weeks progress. For those who love 2K22, 2K23 is a must-buy to the point there's no real reason to go back to the previous version, other than liking the roster more, something that talented creationists can fix. Thanks to community creations, this may not be the wrestling game equivalent of WrestleMania 17, but will go down as one of the best in the franchise.
To make a first impression, and this one might include a hurt ankle.
And Rhea's taking advantage. Riptide! Covered by Ripley!
Rhea got her. Stop.
Is there any fight left in Rollins?
And seconds left before the odds are evened here. He begins to climb the wall of the War Games cage.
Boot.
Wait a second. He's going up the wall? The extreme War Games mentality is taking over.